Good morning again. Good morning, Sal. Thank you. Wow. We're wide awake. The Christians are awake. Thank you again for letting me be here. First thing, the title is Grief in Heaven. And then I'll say, what idiot thought he would tackle both grief and heaven together in one 10-minute talk, and I'm the idiot to try to do that today. Both on their own are big and unimaginable. But I'll start you off with this story, as you know, and thank you, Kim, for the introduction earlier. In running youth group for a long time and being with teenagers, you know, part of my role and responsibility was to give them their autonomy, right? It belongs to them, right? That it wasn't my job to tell them how to think, how to act all the time. It was my job to be present with them as they grow and develop. And there's more to that. But anyway, so at youth group one day, I rolled out the ball and I said, is there a heaven? And for the first 40 minutes, my Christian kids bashed heaven from here to heaven and maybe to hell. And I was heartbroken. So, you know, hand number one, go ahead, John. And John would be like, nah, just a construct for adults to keep you in prison. I'm like, what? But this is what I have to do. I have to go, thank you, John. I appreciate your opinion. Thank you. Anybody else? And then Megan over here goes, no, there's no such thing as heaven. I'm like, what? So I'm crestfallen because as their so-called spiritual leader, I'm like, all this time with me and then this thing doesn't exist? And I am like heartbroken, but my job is to go, Megan, I appreciate your input. Anybody else? So for 40 minutes, it was bash, bash, bash. They had answers all over the place, and I fielded them and thanked them. Then finally, 40 minutes in, kid raises his hand like this, and he's like, and I said, Seamus. And he said, you know, I kind of believe there is a heaven. And inside, I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. But again, I'm like, thank you, Seamus, how come? And he said, I like that God gives us an idea of hope and that there's another place. And then one by one, the dominoes started to fall the other way. As hand after hand is like, I like that. I kind of believe. And the next 20 minutes were kids talking themselves into heaven. And again, I have to be careful. It's their journey. But what I was grateful for is I felt, as I just said, they were talking themselves into hope and something bigger beyond this place that can make reason of the crazy and difficult things we experience. And that was a great moment for me to be able to sit in the bigness of this question and hear these young people first deconstruct it and then reconstruct it. And that was really powerful to me. So this is called Grief in Heaven, and I today stand before the bigness of this thing called grief. And I don't know how you feel, but I'll tell you why. I am very small in the face of the bigness of grief. And not insignificant, just small. And so your community, us, we have suffered, this community has suffered a communal grief in the passing of Brian, Stacy's husband. And it's great to have Stacy with us here today. And for Stacy and for Duncan and for Owen and her whole family and for you, right? There's a communal grief here, but there's also individual griefs that we all walk into this service together carrying our own personal grief that has caused us great pain. So I'm not trying to diminish myself when I say this, that I'm small in the face of it, but I'd love to do two things. And I find that we often don't do this, that we carry our grief to funeral homes and thank God for churches, right? Because they help us to process this great grief. But funeral homes, funerals, but sometimes we never talk about it in groups. You know, we just carry it personally. So my first question, I'm going to ask you for your help in two ways. And help number one is, in your own personal grief, has there been something very personal that helped you? Maybe someone brought a lasagna by. Maybe someone unexpectedly showed up to the wake and you never expected that. Maybe someone had words of wisdom that you have carried with you your whole life. You're like, you know what? Someone said this to me and it really helped me. I'm going to throw a moment of humor in there. I don't remember doing this. We were 18 years old. One of my best friends, his 86-year-old grandmother died 10 years after her wake. My buddy comes up to me and he said, Sal, do you know what you said to me? I said, at my grandmother's wake? He said, it really helped. And I said, no, I don't remember. He said, you said, geez, Wade, you can't live forever, but your grandmother sure gave it a good shot. I'm like, wow, that was pretty witty. I don't remember saying it, but I'll take it. And I'll keep repeating that story the rest of my life. But I'm going to step away from that for a sec. Does anyone, maybe if there are 3 or 4 people that you would share, that's something that made a difference for you in your personal grief and has filled you with great deal of gratitude? Kim, thank you.
I had more time to think about this than you guys. When my father died, someone said to me,
Kim, no one on the live stream is going to be able to hear you.
Oh, do we have a handheld?
We've got legs.
No. Okay. When my father died, someone said to me, grief will hit you when you least expect it.
Thank you. Clap for that. And I love that, if you don't mind me, just that the idea that, like, I think sometimes in my finite brain, there's like, oh, you get over it, and then you're done. Right? Just keeps coming back. Thank you. And if it's easy, you can say it from your seat. I'll repeat it. But if you want to come up, I'll share this mic. But, wow, the crowd is like, go up. Take that mic away from him.
When my mom died, her sister had died 4 months before, my aunt. And when my mother, my aunt that had died, had been very sick all her life, but she had the greatest attitude, and she had this crazy kind of laugh. And when my mom died, I heard that laugh, and I knew her sister was there waiting for her to greet her.
That's awesome. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Anybody else brave enough to come up? Awesome. Thank you. And Linda, that'll be a good segue to my next question, too.
When my parents died, I just let the grief come, and I had a therapist who taught me how to cry, which was really good. That you sit on the edge of your bed or your chair, kind of like you're sitting on the can, you know, and you lean you put your hands on your elbows, because sometimes you feel like you don't want to start crying because you may never stop, and just put your head in your hands and lean over and just let the heaving sobs come. Just let them come in waves, and it never will last more than 20 minutes. And usually it lasts about 90 seconds or 2 minutes. But just to let those waves come, because they're real and there's nothing wrong with them. But the other thing, that as I go on and I find myself going through life and I do something that was like my mom or dad, or I experience something that they would have loved, instead of feeling their absence, I feel that as, I call it a visitation, that I've had a visitation and a little moment of connection with them. And so I go through life seeing those all the time, like a beautiful butterfly or a nature thing, or when I think of something in an engineering pattern, my dad would have loved that, like just looking at the structure of a bridge or something, and I call that a visitation. So I have those a lot. So.
And I have to say, the theology geek in me loves the idea of visitation. Right? And I'm going to take that. I believe in this idea that as we grapple down here on earth, that we get these little tiny slices of heaven that then we can relate to the next world in, and maybe not in full, but in peace. And I love that, the visitations. I'm going to jump on to part two. And in part two, and it goes along with the last two, that, first up, well, I'll wrap up by saying this, that on that, one of the things as I was reflecting on this, I started thinking about the book, The 5 Love Languages, and it's physical touch, words of affirmation, time spent, gifts, and acts of service, right? And there are probably more, but that book does a good job of outlining 5 love languages. And I thought we as people at our time of grief really benefit from any and all of those 5, like the people who show up or send a text or a phone call or a card. So sort of that time spent, that physical presence. Or some people are at a loss for words, but they get your oil changed in your car. Or they, send someone to clean your house and you're like, oh, thank God, the kind words. And we all can flub on these. And we've all heard things that haven't helped, as people are trying their best to say something that does help. But even the intention of somebody desiring to help and maybe saying words that don't match our feelings, just knowing that they care enough to try, the gifts that might show up, thinking of you and got you this little cross that reminded me of your mom or whatever. So any of these things, I think of, geez, isn't it wild in our grief that the 5 love languages really fit that time. The second part, and I'm going to ask your help, and we just heard 2 beautiful pieces. How does your faith help you? So one is maybe the community and people at large and things that happen in our physical world, but is there anything particularly, and I think we heard it on 2 parts right now, but is there anything, does anyone want to take the mic and say, you know what, this is how my faith informs my grief and helps me to heal? Oh.
I won't come up. I'm just going to, you can repeat this.
Sure.
Just briefly. The kinds of things I talked about happen over and over again. The visitations and so when it keeps happening, how can you not have it? You have to be open to it.
Awesome. And being open to these moments that keep coming over and over again, right? That we see in signs, right? And that being open to that. My niece once said to me, I showed her a sign of somebody else's passing that someone was good enough to share with me. And she said, Uncle, I just think, but noticed you were grieving and came up and held your hands and said, I know that you're grieving. And what was the next line that she said?
Well, she said, please sit down and we can talk. She actually gave me a massage on my shoulder because that was what she was doing also in the South. Very different in the South if you ever visit there. And it was so relaxing. And as she was giving me a shoulder massage, she was saying a passage. She was saying, meditation words, and it was very soothing and very calming. And I really felt an incredible connection with her.
Awesome. Thank you. That's beautiful. Yeah. And really true, right? Angels that appear among us on earth and real live people, right? Thank you. And I know.
Oh, I was going to forget it, but I'm not going to.
No, we're not going to forget it.
I don't shut up. Don't worry about it. I just have to say that I've gone to this church since I was in the 3rd grade. So that's a long time. And my family, we have had so many happy and sad occasions here at the church that when I just lost my sister recently, and she has helped me through so many different things, but I said to myself, you got through all these others, and your sister helped you get through them, and now you can do it. But like my father had his funeral was here, my mother's funeral was here, and then we had weddings. I was married here. My daughter was married here. Children were, baptized, christened, all, and it just kind of goes on, and it's just how important the church just continues to be. And every time I come to church, I'll just say, I just love my church. It's
of God's stained glass window.
Hard to put it all together.
No, but that is beautiful. And I'll say that we're, maybe you heard this before, we're spiritual beings in a human body. And because we are here, we need physical presence. And the church becomes a physical presence and marks the time of the highs and lows in our lives. And there's a collective remembering of the journey that we take and surrounding it in a greater hope in a language that really belongs to churches. That's beautiful. Or synagogues, right? I want, that whatever faith tradition people come from. And thank God for our churches, our mosques, our synagogues, and all the beautiful places that allow us to collect together. And I'll share that. Thank you. I want to thank you. Obviously, we're not going to solve all this in one fell swoop here today, but there's a collective wisdom in the collective voice of people sharing their experiences. And I'll say for the five of you that spoke, like, I am lifted up when I hear other people's journey and what got them through. Like, that really helps me to feel not so alone, again, in this bigness called grief, and to realize we share this journey and we also share the hope and the vision of something better. I'm just going to share a couple things I'll share on three quick levels. And one is the promise that Jesus gave us, and it's in the first two readings. And this gives me great hope that Jesus is in grief, and he's in sorrow, and he's next to a criminal who said, I deserve my death. And Jesus looks at him in his moment of pain and says, today you will be with me in paradise. And that, to me, is amazing. Because I know when I'm in my pain, sometimes it's hard to see other people's pain. And so let's say Jesus isn't God, he's just a person. Like, that's still an unbelievable moment that someone can do that for somebody else and promise them something beyond the pain. That really, really sticks with me. And then the second one, and I'll say this, for someone who's a sinner, I like to know that maybe I'm going someplace better. The second one is in my Father's house, there are many dwelling places, and I've prepared a place for you. And again, this inclusivity, that this life, this thing can be challenging. And I know your challenges, and I know what you're going through, but I've got a place for you that's special and beyond your difficulties. That helps. And so the third thing, it's not in the readings, or the second thing. So one is the promise. The second one is Jesus casts a vision. And he says the kingdom of God is like, he says it over and over and over. The kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. It's a tiny seed. It turns into the biggest bush. The kingdom of God is like yeast, that it will make something rise beyond what you can imagine. The kingdom of God is like pearls of unimaginable value, that when you see them, you leave everything else and go to those pearls. The kingdom of God is a hidden treasure in a field where once you find that, you will leave everything behind. The kingdom of God is like fishing nets that cannot hold all the fish because it will burst. And the kingdom of God is like the teacher who becomes the disciple. Before the greatness of God, no matter how much we know, we kneel in total shock and awe and wonder of this place that is so far beyond us. So Jesus, as I said, gives us a promise, and then he casts a vision of what this beautiful place is like. In all of this, I'll read what I wrote, is so far beyond my imagination that I'm blessed to have had moments like the angels, blessed to have had moments where I'm like, that must be what heaven is like. Because in this moment, when I stand in this goodness, for whatever brief amount of time is, that must be the eternity of it on the other side. And I'll give a quick little thing. My grandparents died 26 and 28 years ago, respectively. And this feels impossible to me. My gratitude has grown unimaginably. I was so worried that I would forget memories of them, and that hasn't happened. The opposite has happened. My gratitude has gotten bigger. It's very much like the yeast and the mustard seed. And I'm like, so I don't have their physical presence, but what God gave me is the yeast of the gratitude that I have for them. And I'm like, that's impossible. I don't remember what I ate yesterday. You know, so I love when these things happen, all these moments that we all talk about. And this is the final one, and this is very personal. Maybe you feel the same way. I just want to say the greatest moment for me in the history of all of humankind is the crucifixion and the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So not only did he cast a transcendent vision, not only did he promise us, but then he lived it. And he said, I will suffer an untimely death at too young of an age. I will suffer a brutal and painful death that I did not deserve. I will suffer a miscarriage of justice so great it will be unimaginable. I will be on my knees pleading and begging with my God. And I will suffer the loneliness and the pain and the grief on the cross. I will do all that so that I will come out on the other side, and I will say to you, Sal, and I will say to you people, that these are not just words of hope, and these are not just empty visions. I'm going to lead the way through my death and resurrection to prove that there's another side. I will come back gleaming. I will be so bright that you will have trouble recognizing me. I will say what I said in the book of Revelations, see, I make all things new. It's the greatest moment in the history of the world, according to me. And that moment in history gives me great hope. So I started by saying we stand before the bigness of grief, and it is big. But I'm glad that because of Jesus, we stand before an even bigger antidote in heaven and God's love. And I'm grateful for that antidote that is bigger than the bigness of grief. Thank you. I'm grateful. Thank you for letting me share some words. Thank you for your beautiful presence. And thank you for your words to all of us and to me. Thank you.